Postal 2 is undeniably goofy, a dark comedy steeped in crude humor, absurd violence, and satire that dunked on everything from waiting in line to violent sieges. The first game's mind-shattering cutscenes and the soul-crushing despair of its ending were retired, being replaced with a more sardonic and comedic tone. However, the stains of bloodshed run deep, and many areas in Postal 2 retain the creepy and unnerving nature of its horrifying predecessor. Before the game even begins, we're shown a somewhat ethereal scene outside of the game's reality. The menu shares similar qualities to Postal 1, using many of the same sound effects. In the opening cutscene, we're presented with panning shots of Arizona, while an uneasy droning sound plays. The harsh desert landscape is juxtaposed against this sign, "Welcome to Paradise." A crude amendment to the population seems to allude to the town's high death rate, which is exemplified in the cemetery. At first, the amount of grave sites is quite sparse, but day by day, new plots appear, and by Friday, it is completely full. This occurs even when playing pacifistically, meaning regardless of the player's actions, death is happening en masse. There's an interesting parallel in this area, found in a ditch that runs through a substantial portion of the zone. At the deepest point near the sewer entrance, we can find it littered with abandoned furniture and broken appliances. Just over the hill is a storage facility for hazardous waste. The toxic barrels are piled high, and many have fallen into the gutter below. The noxious fumes overlook the cemetery, and at the very end of the ditch, there are exhumed coffins and old bones protruding from the earth. The dead are discarded with the same care as toxic waste and broken goods. This whole zone is a dumping ground for things to be forgotten. Just beyond these skeletons, a faint looping sound can be heard. This is taken from the construction site loading screen of Postal 1. Several ambient tracks have returned and are scattered throughout Paradise. 29 dot wave echoes through the mine level of the first game, but this rhythmic, metallic droning can also be found near the bridge entrance to the estates. Most of the dwellings in the estate are relatively normal, at least by the standards of Paradise. One house, however, just near this audible anomaly, is harboring a dark secret. Heading inside and into the bathroom reveals a grisly scene. Blood is strewn across the bathtub and walls. Among the bloodshed is a variety of surgical instruments, but whoever met their end here is long gone. For the vast majority of storefronts in Paradise Mall, nothing seems out of the ordinary. The gentle music is almost serene, but walking into an area where it isn't present gives way to the droning white noise of the mall's true ambient sound. One occurrence of this is in the pet store when moving into its back room, though it's made infinitely worse by the scene you'll find there. This is far beyond some kind of veterinary mishap. It's careless butchery. A similar thread can be found at the Slaughterhouse. An abattoir is hardly a place one would expect to find warm and inviting ambience, but in Meat World, any semblance of welcome is cut to the bone. It would be nothing out of the ordinary to find carcasses hung throughout a facility like this, but their placement next to urinals is less than ideal. Some cows also find a worse fate than the hooks, and are being fed directly into machinery. The butchers here have also escalated their decimation beyond animals. Upon entering, we witness a group of them dropping humans into a giant grinder, all while reveling in the slaughter. Not far beyond Meatworld, nestled amongst the suburbs, is a wall that has clearly been sealed up. Hidden inside this barrier is a collection of burned bodies, and an altar, all enveloped in a low, ominous hum. Some areas are slightly more subtle, less focused on gore, while still exuding an aura of anxiety. The history of mental asylums is lengthy and brutal, and the in-game location evokes those horrors of the past. Simply stepping foot on the asylum grounds fills the soundscape with tortured screams. In the basement of the asylum, there is a diagram of a brain with an outline plan to extract the pineal gland. While the chalkboard instructions are seemingly a joke, its placement near an examination chair does little to lighten the tone. The base game ends with a dispute between the postal dude and his wife, followed by a gunshot.
Did you remember my rocky road?
While the circumstances and outcome were originally ambiguous, the release of the game's first expansion would illuminate what occurred.
Oh man, it was just a horrible dream. Where the hell am I? And why does my medulla oblongata hurt?
You've suffered a terrible head injury. You barely survived your unfortunate firearms accident.
Dude finds himself recovering in the hospital from a self-inflicted bullet to the brain.
Oh, get well cards. And I've only been here overnight.
His home is being repossessed, his dog is about to be put down, and his wife laments his survival.
You should only die. I'm moving back in with Mother. Signed, your hateful wife. Well, at least the news isn't all bad.
Taking this all in stride, Dude remains sarcastic and relatively chipper, but must now contend with another factor. His head wound causes him to experience wild hallucinations. The walls become charred, glass turns to swirling waters, and any of the hospital staff you encounter have this bizarre texture, as if paint was flaking off to reveal rust underneath. It also seems to manifest experience from his recent past. The most prominent is the reoccurring apparitions of Gary Coleman that violently throw themselves at the postal dude. There are a few variations in appearance, and they attack in different fashions. Canonically, Coleman lives through the book signing, and can even be found in the hospital itself, now covered in bruises and bandages, but he runs in terror if approached.
Shit!
Beyond the legion of Gary ghosts, other morbid scenes appear before Dude. One of the surgery rooms briefly flashes with blood and viscera, for instance. The diagrams of the brain can also be found throughout the hospital, including one in the administration rooms. It can also be found in the psychiatric ward, which, like the asylum, has an examination room and padded cells. With the head wound in full effect, the walls of this empty cell have an almost meat-like texture. It is very reminiscent of the ending of Postal 1. The other cell that contains a patient, however, appears normal. One more unsettling piece in the hospital can be found in the maternity ward, where there is a visible nursery, but a total absence of anyone inside. There are no children in Postal 2, but things like this and the crashed school bus in the forest just feel a bit off. The head wound hallucinations continue and intensify on the following day in the military base. More walls of meat and smouldering boars that cover the ceiling, as well as this doorway, one of the more shining examples of the ease at which Postal 2 could reach a more horror-centric vision. Eventually, you're engulfed in a hellish inferno. From here, you must do a small platforming section to progress, and the rocks you cross have a texture similar to this photo of settled lava. The largest slabs of stone are secured by these enormous chains, held in place by pillars that extend into the fiery abyss below. Moving along this path, many objects are suspended in the air. Broken sections of buildings, items from the previous days, and most notably, Dude's motorhome, hovering just out of reach. There are some other brief, quiet moments between all of the chaos. One is found in this service tunnel, with a bed behind a curtain, and blood covering it all. Presumably, an on-call maintenance worker, unaware of the apocalypse unraveling outside these walls, taken by the undead with no warning. Another is when you wander the veterinary hospital, looking for Champ. Small factors, like the pouring rain outside, and being isolated in a place you would never normally visit at night, gives a simple sense of unease.
Hello? Looks like no one's home. Guess I'll just have to find Champ myself. What could possibly happen?
Apocalypse Weekend wraps up with you crossing the bridge. Dude eventually spots his mobile home and starts sprinting towards it before the head wound kicks in for the final time, and the landscape shifts to a boss fight. Although this encounter is about as subtle as being hit with a shovel, the surrounding environment being enveloped in a fog, and the castle-like texture seems so out of place. Postal 2 is not a horror game by any stretch, but it has roots in the morbid and the grotesque. What other gruesome sights and unearthly behaviours are lurking in paradise?